I stared at our joint bank statements, unable to believe what she'd done. The betrayal burned deeper than any wound I'd ever felt. My name is Edison Hart, and I'm 33 years old. Each morning now begins with coffee alone, tallying damages and strategizing next steps from the kitchen table of what used to be our home. My wife, Leslie, the woman I trusted with everything, didn't just destroy my restored '67 Mustang that night. She shattered the foundation of our marriage with calculated deceit. For 10 years, I'd rebuilt that car bolt by bolt after my father died, creating something beautiful through patience and discipline. I've never been one for vengeance, but justice? That's different. I won't let her theft of our savings and destruction of my property stand without consequences. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. I remember that night like it was etched into my bones. It was 11:42 p.m., late by most standards, but normal hours for me when I was working on the Mustang. The garage was my sanctuary. Just me, the tools my dad left me, and the '67 fastback I'd been restoring since he passed. I was tightening the last bolt on the new carburetor I'd installed. Johnny Cash played low on the old radio that had survived 3 moves and countless oil changes. The smell of metal and the faint hint of gasoline hung in the air, smells that always reminded me of Saturday afternoons with my father, his patient voice explaining how engines breathe, how they need respect to run right. "Are you seriously still out here?" I didn't need to look up to know Leslie was standing in the doorway. Her voice had that edge to it, the one that had become more familiar than the sweet tone I fell in love with 7 years ago. "Just finishing up," I said, setting down the wrench and wiping my hands on a shop rag. She stood barefoot on the cold concrete, arms crossed tight against her chest. The argument from dinner was still written across her face, that tightness around her eyes, the slight forward tilt of her chin. We'd been fighting about finances again, money that seemed to disappear faster than it should. I reached over and switched off the radio. The sudden silence felt heavy. "It's almost midnight, Edison," she said, stepping closer. "Normal husbands come to bed. They don't hide with hunks of metal." "I'm not hiding. I told you I needed to finish the carburetor tonight." "Priorities," she scoffed, running her finger along the freshly polished fender. "That's our problem, isn't it? Your priorities are bolts and chrome, while I'm trying to make our house something we can be proud of." I took a deep breath. "The bills are covered, Leslie. We've talked about this. The restoration budget comes from overtime hours. It doesn't touch our household money." "That's not the point." Her voice bounced off the garage walls. "This obsession, this car, it takes all your attention. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in a house with outdated everything because you think a water heater that works is good enough. The water heater is fine. We replaced it 2 years ago. And the kitchen cabinets, the back deck, the master bathroom that looks like it's from 1992. She threw her hands up. "You don't see it, do you? You're so busy making this perfect," she gestured at the car, "that you don't care if we live in a dump." "We don't live in a dump," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice level. "And we agreed to tackle house projects one at a time when we have the money saved." She turned on her heel and walked back into the kitchen. I followed, watching as she yanked open drawers and slammed them shut. "What are you looking for?" "Evidence," she snapped, pulling a stack of papers from a folder by the microwave. She spread bills across the counter, cable, electric, credit card statements I didn't recognize. "Look at this. Just look." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down at the screen and felt my stomach drop. A banking alert. $7,800 withdrawal processed from joint savings account. I looked up slowly. "Did you take money out of our savings today?" Her face shifted, that momentary flicker of being caught before defensiveness rushed in. "Don't use that tone with me." "It's a simple question, Leslie. $7,800. Did you withdraw it?" "I moved it," she said, crossing her arms again. "For household use, the kind you keep putting off." "Without telling me?" "That's most of our emergency fund." "Because you control everything." Her voice rose sharply. "Every dollar has to be accounted for, every purchase justified to you. It's suffocating. We're supposed to make big financial decisions together, I said, feeling a strange calm settling over me even as my heart pounded. That was our agreement. Agreements change when one person refuses to see what's important, she said, her eyes darting around the kitchen. This house matters. Our life together should matter more than that stupid car. Something dark passed across her face then. A decision being made. She walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the baseball bat we kept for home security. "What are you doing?" I asked, but I already knew. "Teaching you what obsession looks like," she said, heading toward the garage. I followed her, my body moving in slow motion, watching as she gripped the bat with both hands. The first swing connected with the driver's side door of my Mustang with a sickening crack that echoed through the night. I stood frozen, unable to move as metal screamed and gave way beneath her fury. Metal screamed as the bat connected with the hood. Glass exploded as she took out the driver's side window. Each impact sent shards of my heart falling alongside the broken pieces. I stood in the doorway, watching my wife destroy 10 years of work, patience, and memories. "Leslie, stop!" My voice sounded distant in my own ears. "This isn't going to solve anything." She whirled toward me, face contorted, hair wild around her shoulders. "Now you want to talk? Now you care?" Another swing caught the side mirror, sending it dangling by wires. "You love this stupid car more than you've ever loved me." "That's not true," I said, but she wasn't listening. "Every weekend, every spare dollar, it all goes to this thing." Her next blow dented the roof with a hollow boom. "You polish it, you talk to it, you spend hours finding the perfect parts while I'm begging for attention." I reached for my phone in my back pocket, hands steady despite the chaos. I started recording, not to escalate things, to protect myself. Something in my gut told me this moment would matter later. "Put that down!" she screamed when she noticed. "Don't you dare record me!" But I kept the camera rolling as she continued her rampage. The headlights shattered. The grille bent inward, each swing more desperate than the last, until her hands were red and blistering around the bat handle. "You want to see what it feels like to have something you love destroyed?" She was crying now, ugly sobs between swings. "This is what you've done to me, to us." I didn't approach her. I didn't try to grab the bat. I stood at a distance, documenting every moment, every accusation, every blow. The car was just metal and glass. It could be fixed. But whatever was breaking between us, that felt irreparable. When her arms finally gave out, Leslie stood panting in the center of the garage, surrounded by broken glass and twisted metal. The Mustang sat wounded, headlights punched out like blinded eyes, windows gone, body dented beyond recognition. "I'm calling the police," I said quietly. She let out a hollow laugh. "Of course you are. The car matters more than your marriage. This isn't about the car anymore, Leslie." "Whatever," she spat, dropping the bat with a clatter. "Call them. See if I care." She walked back into the house, shoulders slumped, but chin still defiant. I dialed 911 with numb fingers, explaining what happened in the most clinical terms I could manage. While waiting, I walked around the car, taking detailed photos of each point of damage. The driver's door caved inward. The dashboard splintered where she'd reached through the broken window. The leather seats slashed by glass. 10 years of restoration reduced to scrap in 10 minutes of rage. When I was a kid, my dad used to say that cars were just metal. They could always be fixed. But he also taught me that some damage shows you the truth about who caused it. 2 patrol officers arrived 20 minutes later. Officer Ramirez, older with salt and pepper hair, took my statement while his partner, John, photographed the scene and spoke briefly with Leslie inside the house. "How long have you been married, sir?" Ramirez asked, his pen poised above his notepad. 4 years, I answered. "Any history of property destruction before tonight?" "No, nothing like this." He nodded, writing everything down. "And you didn't attempt to physically stop her during the incident?" "No. I stayed by the door and recorded it. I showed him the video on my phone, which he asked me to email to the department. "We'll file this as domestic property destruction," he said finally. "You'll get a case number for insurance purposes." When they left, I couldn't bring myself to go back inside. Instead, I sat on the porch steps, watching stars fade as night slowly surrendered to morning. My marriage was lying in pieces like my car, but unlike the Mustang, I wasn't sure it could, or should, be restored. The first rays of sunlight were creeping over the horizon when I finally opened my laptop. My hands trembled slightly as I typed into the search bar, "Property damage and financial fraud lawyer near me." I arrived 15 minutes early for my appointment with Erin Caldwell, attorney at law. Her office occupied the third floor of a renovated brick building downtown, the kind with exposed beams and tall windows. The reception area was understated. No leather couches or pretentious artwork, just clean lines and organized spaces. It felt practical, which was exactly what I needed. "Mr. Hart?" A woman with auburn hair and sharp eyes approached, hand extended. "I'm Erin Caldwell. Come on back." Her office continued the theme of functional efficiency: a desk with minimal clutter, law books organized by topic, and two comfortable chairs facing each other. "So," she said, settling into her chair, "tell me what happened." I pulled out my phone and opened the video. This was 2 nights ago. Her expression didn't change as she watched Leslie demolish my car, but I noticed her jaw tighten slightly. When the video ended, she handed the phone back. "You stayed remarkably calm during all that," she observed. "Didn't feel calm," I admitted. "That self-control will serve you well." She leaned forward. "Now, you mentioned on the phone there might be financial issues as well?" I pulled out the bank statements I'd printed. $7,800 withdrawn without my knowledge. But this morning I found more. She spread the papers across her desk, studying the highlighted sections. Her finger traced along a series of transactions. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know exactly. I just started digging." She nodded, making notes. "This isn't just vandalism, Mr. Hart. This is a pattern of financial misconduct within a marriage. In some jurisdictions, we'd call it financial abuse." The word abuse hung in the air. I'd never thought of myself as a victim of anything. "First step," Erin continued, "freeze that joint account immediately. Second, request all bank statements from the past 6 months. Look for any credit inquiries in your name." "You think People who hide financial activity often open lines of credit their partners don't know about." I drove straight to the bank after our meeting. The branch manager's face grew increasingly uncomfortable as I explained my situation. After verifying my identity, she pulled up our accounts on her screen. "Mr. Hart, there appear to be 3 credit cards issued in the past year under your name that are linked to this address." She turned the monitor so I could see. "The combined balance is approximately $22,000. My stomach dropped. "I didn't open those. There's also a home equity line of credit with a $15,000 draw." I remembered the new furniture, the kitchen renovation Leslie had insisted on, things I'd attributed to careful saving. All debt, all hidden. "I need to freeze everything," I said. When I called Erin from the bank parking lot, her response was immediate. "That's identity theft, even between spouses. Get copies of everything. We're going to need it all." The afternoon sun was starting to fade as I pulled into Ricardo's auto shop. The Mustang sat in his bay, looking worse in the harsh fluorescence than it had in my garage. Ricardo whistled low when he saw me. "Man, when you said she did a number on it, I didn't expect this." He walked around the car slowly, taking notes on a clipboard. "Frames bent, custom glass all gone. Interior will need complete restoration. Engine block took a few hits. Can you fix it?" "Can I fix it?" "Of course." He squatted to examine the undercarriage. "Question is whether you want to pay what it'll cost." "How much?" He scratched figures on his notepad. "Parts alone, we're looking at 18, maybe 20,000. Labor might push it to 30, depending what we find once we start." I nodded, running my hand along the dented hood. This car had been more than metal to me. It was the last project I'd started with my father before he died. Every weekend for a decade I'd worked on it, hunting down original parts, learning techniques from old manuals. Ricardo put his hand on my shoulder. "She hit more than metal, didn't she?" I met his eyes and nodded. The truth of it settled in my chest like a weight. That night, I compiled everything. The video, photos, bank statements, credit reports, Ricardo's damage estimate into one file and sent it all to Aaron. As I hit send, I looked out toward the garage where the Mustang's broken silhouette sat under a single dim light. In that moment, it wasn't just a car. It was everything Leslie had tried to fracture. My past, my trust, my future. 2 days later, I pulled into the driveway after a 9-hour shift at the garage. The sunset cast long shadows across the house we'd bought together 3 years earlier. My shoulders ached from leaning over engines all day, but the physical pain was easier to handle than what waited inside. I noticed her car parked at an angle, as though she'd arrived in a hurry. The mail slot on the front door hung open, empty. That's when I knew. When I stepped into the kitchen, Leslie sat at our table surrounded by opened envelopes, bank notices, and what looked like the freeze confirmation letters I'd had sent to the house. Her hair was pulled back tight, making her face seem sharper than usual. She didn't look up when I set my keys down. "You humiliated me," she said, voice eerily controlled as she slid a bank letter across the table. "I had to find out from the cashier at Target that our accounts are frozen. Do you have any idea how that felt?" I stayed near the doorway, keeping my distance. "About as good as finding out my wife took out credit cards in my name without telling me." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "You don't get it, do you? I was handling things, making sure we had what we needed. $22,000 in credit card debt that I never knew about isn't handling things, Leslie. It's theft." She stood up, pushing envelopes aside. "Theft? We're married. Everything is supposed to be ours." I spoke with Aaron Caldwell yesterday. I kept my voice steady, remembering what the attorney had told me about staying calm. The police report's already been filed for the car. She's also preparing documentation about the financial fraud. Financial fraud? It's called managing our life. Leslie's voice rose. That kitchen renovation you love so much? The furniture in the living room? That didn't appear by magic, Edison. We never agreed to go into debt for those things. Because you never want anything. She swept her hand across the table, sending envelopes fluttering to the floor. You'd live in an empty house with just that stupid car in the garage if I let you. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, but pushed through it. Carefully, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed record on my phone. Those credit cards are in my name, Leslie. The loans affect my credit. You forged my signature. I signed for you because you'd never do it yourself. Every penny went into this house, our house." Her eyes narrowed. "Drop the charges." "I can't do that." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous and low. "Drop the charges, or I'll tell everyone what you're really like. How controlling you are. How you monitor every dollar. How you care more about metal than your own wife." The old Edison might have backed down, might have tried to keep the peace. But something had broken in me the night I watched her swing that bat. Something I couldn't repair. "You've already ruined your own reputation, Leslie. I'm just documenting it." The color drained from her face. For a moment she stood perfectly still, as though she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Then her expression twisted into something I didn't recognize. "You think you're so perfect," she hissed. "So righteous. You have no idea what I'm capable of." She grabbed her purse from the counter, knocking over a glass that shattered against the tile. Neither of us moved to clean it up. The broken pieces lay between us like everything else we'd destroyed. "This isn't over," she said, walking toward the door. "Not even close." The slam echoed through the house, followed by the screech of tires as she pulled out of the driveway. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, heart hammering. Then I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording, and texted Aaron. Leslie found out about the frozen accounts. Things got heated. She threatened to retaliate. I have it recorded. Aaron's response came quickly. "Keep everything documented. Don't engage. Let her show her hand." I looked down at the mess of papers on the floor, the physical evidence of our unraveling life together. Beneath them, shards of glass caught the kitchen light, sharp and dangerous. The next morning, I entered Aaron Caldwell's office with dark circles under my eyes. Sleep had been impossible after Leslie's threats. Aaron was already at her desk, a stack of documents laid out in precise rows. She motioned for me to sit. "The subpoenas came through faster than expected," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "Most judges take financial fraud seriously, especially with evidence this clear." I flipped through the pages, my stomach dropping with each new discovery. Bank statements showed regular withdrawals, $500 here, wanting $200 there, all transferred to accounts I didn't recognize. The pattern stretched back almost 8 months. "And this," Erin said, pulling out a loan application, "is where things get actionable." She pointed to my signature at the bottom of a home equity line of credit for $32,000. Except it wasn't my signature. Not exactly. The loops were wrong, the pressure points off. "I never signed this," I said, my voice hollow. "I know." Erin tapped a manicured nail against the document. "The bank's already confirmed it doesn't match your signature card." "That's forgery, Edison. It's criminal." The word hung in the air between us. Criminal. My wife was a criminal. "What happens now?" I asked. Erin laid out 3 separate documents. "First, we file a civil suit for the vandalism of your vehicle. Ricardo's estimate puts the damage at just over $30,000. We'll demand full restitution. Second, we petition for reimbursement of all unauthorized withdrawals. Third, we file for an emergency separation order to protect your remaining assets." I remembered the first time I met Leslie, how she'd laughed at something I said, how natural it felt. Now here I was, signing papers to legally separate myself from her, like cutting away an infection before it spread. "Will this stop her?" I asked as I signed the last document. Erin's expression softened slightly. "It won't stop her feelings, but it will limit what she can legally do to hurt you further." "That's all I need," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. The next 2 days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Erin's assistant called to confirm they'd submitted everything to the court. The police forwarded their final report, which detailed each strike to the Mustang with timestamps from my video. The insurance adjuster corroborated Ricardo's estimate, calling the damage extensive and deliberate. It was all so clinical, reducing the destruction of something I loved to numbers on a page. Ricardo came by that afternoon with a heavy-duty car tarp. We stood in the garage, surveying the damage in daylight. It looked worse somehow. The shattered glass now settled into the seats, the bent metal catching sunlight where it shouldn't. "I've seen cars totaled in high-speed crashes that looked better than this," Ricardo said, shaking his head. His hands, perpetually stained with engine grease, rested gently on the crumpled hood. "She really wanted to hurt you, brother." "I still don't understand why," I said as we carefully draped the tarp over the mangled frame. "It's just a car." Ricardo gave me a knowing look. "It's never just about the car. My father left my mother after 20 years, and she burned every photo of him in the yard. People hit what they can reach when they can't hit what they want. And what did Leslie want? To feel powerful." Ricardo secured the tarp with bungee cords. "People who feel small inside want to make others feel smaller. Trust me, her anger isn't going away. It'll just find new targets." His warning stayed with me through dinner, which I ate alone at the kitchen counter. The house felt too big now, too empty without the constant tension of Leslie's presence. I almost missed the fighting. At least then I knew where she was, what she was doing. My phone buzzed just after 9. A text from Leslie's number lit up the screen. "You'll regret this. You'll lose more than that car." I read it twice, my hands suddenly cold. It wasn't just the words. It was knowing she meant them, that in her mind, I deserved whatever came next. I got up and checked the front door, making sure the deadbolt was secure. Then I went through the house, room by room, verifying that every window was locked. Finally, I pulled up the security camera app on my phone, watching the empty driveway, the still front porch, the darkened side yard. Everything looked normal, safe. But I knew better than to trust appearances now. 3 nights later, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by a fortress of paperwork. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance forms. They formed small mountains that mapped the terrain of my marriage's collapse. The dining room light cast harsh shadows across it all, as I highlighted another suspicious charge from 3 months back. I'd been at this for hours, working through every transaction from the past year. My eyes burned, but I kept going. There's something almost meditative about digging through financial records, like archaeology, but instead of artifacts, you're unearthing lies. The flash caught me off guard, a pulse of red and blue that swept across the dining room wall. For a second, I thought I was seeing things. Then it came again, stronger this time. Police lights. My stomach dropped. I set down my highlighter and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see a patrol car parked at the curb. 2 officers were already walking up my driveway. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and reminded myself I had nothing to hide. When I opened the door, I recognized one of the officers, Ramirez, who had responded the night Leslie destroyed the Mustang. "Mr. Hart," he said, his expression professionally neutral. "We need to speak with you regarding an incident report that was filed earlier today." "What kind of report?" I asked, though something in me already knew. "Your wife has alleged that you made threats against her personal safety during the incident with the vehicle," said the second officer, a woman whose nameplate read John. "She's filed for a protective order." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. "That's not what happened," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have video." Officer Ramirez glanced at his partner. "We'd like to see that, sir." "Of course." "Please, come in." I led them to the living room, pulled out my phone, and queued up the security footage from that night. The camera over the garage door had captured everything. Leslie swinging the bat repeatedly while I stood back, hands clearly raised, never once approaching her. They watched in silence. When it ended, Officer Ramirez's mouth had tightened into a thin line. "Mr. Hart, did you at any point threaten Mrs. Hart before or after what we just saw?" "No. I called the police." "You were here that night," I reminded him, looking directly at Ramirez. "I stayed outside until you arrived." The officers exchanged looks. Officer John cleared her throat. "Despite this footage, we still need to bring you in for questioning. Mrs. Hart's statement includes allegations of threats made off camera." "This is ridiculous," I said, but I knew better than to resist. "Let me call my attorney." "You can do that at the station," Ramirez said. I nodded slowly. "Let me get my jacket." The ride to the station happened in a blur, the neighbor's curtains twitching as I was escorted to the patrol car, the cold plastic of the back seat, the steady thrum of tires on asphalt. I kept telling myself that the truth would protect me, but doubt crept in with each passing mile. Leslie knew exactly what she was doing. At the station, they took my statement, fingerprints, and a mugshot. I called Aaron's emergency line, leaving a message that echoed in the small interview room. When they finally locked me in a holding cell for the night, the concrete bench felt exactly like what it was: punishment for a crime I didn't commit. I didn't sleep. How could I? The cell smelled of disinfectant and desperation, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Leslie's face, twisted with something beyond anger, something calculated. Morning came with the sound of metal doors and shuffling feet. When Aaron appeared, her expression was thunderous beneath her professional composure. "I've been here since 5, she said, her voice low. "I have the footage, the original police report, and witness statements from your neighbors who heard her yelling that night. They're dropping everything." True to her word, 30 minutes later, I was walking out of the station, charges dismissed. The morning sun felt almost offensive in its brightness after the night I'd spent. "This helps us," Aaron said as we stood beside her car. "Filing a false report shows malicious intent. We'll add it to the civil suit." I nodded, too exhausted for words. "You need rest," she added, softer now. "Go home, shower, sleep. I'll call you later." The drive home was silent except for the hum of the engine. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, tension radiating through my body like electricity with nowhere to go. As I pulled into my driveway, I glanced toward the garage, the place that had once been my sanctuary. Through the side window, I could see glints of glass still scattered across the concrete floor, catching the morning light like cruel stars. "Never again," I whispered to no one. The words hung in the air, both a promise and a prayer. The morning after my night in the holding cell, I showered away the stale smell of the station and drove to meet Erin at her office. My body felt heavy from lack of sleep, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. There's something about hitting rock bottom that makes the climb back up feel purposeful. Erin's office was a modest suite downtown. No marble columns or mahogany desks, just practical furniture and walls lined with law books. She had spread documents across her conference table when I arrived. "How are you holding up?" she asked, looking up from her. "Better than yesterday," I said, setting my coffee down. "Ready to move forward?" She nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear. Today we finalized the divorce petition." She tapped a thick folder. "We're including everything: property destruction, financial fraud, emotional distress, and now the false report." I flipped through the pages she'd prepared, each one laying out Leslie's actions in clinical detail. It was strange seeing our marriage reduced to exhibits and allegations. "Remember," Erin said, sliding a pen toward me, "stick to facts in all filings. No emotional language, no accusations we can't back up with evidence. The documents need to speak for themselves." "Got it. And we're requesting full restitution. Every penny she took, every dollar of damage to the Mustang." Erin's voice was firm. "Don't feel guilty about this. She created this situation." I signed where indicated, my signature more confident with each page. "What now?" I asked when we finished. "Now we build our fortress," Erin said. "Every piece of evidence gets cataloged, authenticated, and filed. Every statement, every photo, every bank record." Over the next 3 days, we assembled our case like architects designing a building meant to withstand a hurricane. Ricardo provided detailed documentation of the Mustang's damage, itemized part by part with market costs and labor estimates. The total came to $32,176. "Jesus," I muttered, looking at the figure. "Precision is everything," Erin reminded me. "These aren't just numbers, they're consequences." We gathered statements from neighbors who'd witnessed Leslie's outburst, bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and credit reports revealing accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. The evidence mounted like bricks in a wall. I remembered my father's voice from childhood. "Take your time with the foundation, son. Rush it, and everything above will crack." He'd been talking about rebuilding the Mustang's engine block, but the lesson applied here too. By Friday, Erin had filed motions for restitution, property protection, and financial reimbursement. The court had officially served Leslie with divorce papers and summons to appear. Her response was immediate. My phone exploded with texts and calls. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" Her first voicemail hissed. "You're pathetic." Another came an hour later. "Call off your attack dog lawyer. We can work this out." And finally, "I'll burn everything before I let you win." I showed them all to Erin, who added them to our file without comment. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on what I could control. Ricardo came by most evenings working on salvageable mechanical components in the garage. "The engine's still good," he told me one night, wiping his hands on a rag. "Frame's solid, too. It's mostly body damage and glass." "Thanks for doing this," I said. "Let me pay you something now, at least for parts." He shook his head. "When you win your case, you can pay me." Not before. That night, I slept a full 8 hours for the first time since everything happened. I woke up feeling steady, like I'd found my center of gravity again. The following week settled into a strange routine. Work during the day, evidence gathering in the evening, occasional check-ins with Erin. I started boxing at a local gym to burn off the residual anger. There was something satisfying about hitting something that was designed to be hit, unlike my car. Then, late one night as I was reviewing our case notes, my phone rang. Erin rarely called after hours. "Edison," she said, her voice charged with purpose. "Court date set, 2 weeks from tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything, it's time to finish this." I felt a flutter of nerves, but underneath was something stronger, resolve. "I'll be ready," I promised. After hanging up, I went to my desk and pulled out a photo I'd kept buried in a drawer, the Mustang gleaming in the sunlight, restored to perfection after my father passed. I placed it carefully beside the thick legal folder containing everything we'd built. Side by side, they told the whole story, what was lost and what I was fighting to reclaim. 2 weeks crawled by with the kind of slowness reserved for waiting rooms and hospital vigils. But finally, the morning arrived. I straightened my tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror. The face looking back at me wasn't the same one from 6 months ago. Something had hardened around the eyes. Not cruelty, clarity. "Ready?" Aaron asked when I emerged, briefcase in hand. "As I'll ever be." The courtroom had that hushed, reverent quality of places where lives change course. Wood paneling, American flag, the smell of lemon polish and tension. Aaron and I took our seats at the plaintiff's table, arranging our evidence in neat stacks. Then the side door opened, and Leslie walked in. She'd dressed for sympathy, conservative navy dress, hair pulled back, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes. Her attorney, a silver-haired man with an expensive watch, guided her with a theatrical gentleness to their table. I noticed how she leaned slightly into his support, like someone recovering from illness. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, adjusting her glasses with trembling fingers. "Classic," Aaron whispered. "The victim costume." The bailiff called the room to order, and Judge Harmon entered, a woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a reputation for cutting through nonsense. After preliminaries, Leslie's attorney presented their defense first. He painted a picture of a desperate woman pushed to her breaking point by an emotionally distant husband. "My client was drowning," he said, gesturing toward Leslie, who dabbed at her eyes beneath her sunglasses. "The financial decisions she made were attempts to create the home life Mr. Hart consistently denied her. The unfortunate incident with the vehicle was not malicious destruction. It was a cry for help." Leslie took the stand next. She removed her glasses to reveal reddened eyes. "I just wanted him to see me," she said, voice catching. "Edison spent every weekend with that car. Every holiday, even our anniversary. I needed to feel like I mattered." "And the financial withdrawals?" her attorney prompted gently. "We never discussed finances openly. I had to guess what was appropriate." A tear slid down her cheek. "I was trying to build a life for us while he rebuilt that car." I felt my jaw tightening, but kept my expression neutral. Aaron had coached me well. "Your silence is more powerful than any outburst." When it was our turn, Aaron approached the bench with the steady confidence of someone holding 4 aces. "Your Honor, this case isn't about emotion. It's about documented fraud and destruction of property." She presented the financial records first. 3 credit accounts opened in my name with forged signatures, $22,400 in unauthorized withdrawals, and time-stamped bank records showing Leslie's transactions coinciding with major purchases I'd never seen. "Mr. Hart didn't know about any of these?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor, as evidenced by these credit inquiries showing Mr. Hart's surprise at discovering the accounts." Next came the police report and garage security footage. The courtroom fell silent as the video played. Leslie methodically striking the car, while I stood back, hands visible, making no move toward her. "Does this look like an emotional outburst to you, Your Honor?" Aaron asked. "Or does it look like deliberate destruction?" Ricardo testified last, explaining the meticulous damage to the Mustang, how each strike had targeted the most expensive components to repair. "In your professional opinion, Mr. Torres, was this random damage?" Aaron asked. Ricardo shook his head. "No, ma'am. This was methodical. She hit the custom parts first, the parts that would cost the most to replace." I watched the judge's expression shift as Ricardo spoke. Her pen moved faster across her notepad. Throughout it all, I remained silent, hands folded on the table. Not once did I raise my voice or make accusations. The evidence spoke volumes that my anger never could. In her closing statement, Aaron stood tall, her voice clear as mountain air. "Your Honor, this was not emotion. This was entitlement. Mr. Hart has demonstrated restraint and adherence to legal process, while Mrs. Hart has demonstrated pattern after pattern of deception." The judge took only 15 minutes to return with her decision. "Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of the plaintiff," she announced. Mrs. Hart will pay full restitution for the damage to the vehicle in the amount of $32,476, reimburse the unauthorized withdrawals totaling $22,400, and cover Mr. Hart's legal fees. The home will remain with Mr. Hart as the primary mortgage holder. These payments will be structured in monthly installments over a 5-year period. She looked directly at Leslie. And I strongly suggest you seek financial counseling, Mrs. Hart. Relief washed over me. Not joy, not triumph, just the quiet release of a burden I'd carried for months. Outside the courthouse, spring sunlight spilled across the steps. I loosened my tie and took a deep breath of fresh air. Erin extended her hand. Congratulations, Edison. As we shook hands, she added, You kept your dignity. That's rarer than you might think. I nodded, though my eyes stayed distant, focused on something beyond the courthouse steps, perhaps the future, perhaps just the next hour of freedom. 3 months later, I stood in Ricardo's shop watching him buff the final coat of paint on my Mustang. The deep navy blue gleamed under the industrial lights, not a scratch or dent to be found. The sun coming through the garage windows caught the chrome trim, sending bright reflections dancing across the concrete floor. I ran my hand along the hood, feeling the smooth perfection beneath my fingertips. The car looked better than it had before Leslie took that bat to it. Ricardo had replaced every panel, restored every component, and even upgraded a few things along the way. The engine purred with a deeper, more satisfied growl than before. "What do you think?" Ricardo asked, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. His face was tired but proud. "It's perfect," I said, my voice a little thicker than I intended. "Better than before." He nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite put into words. Sometimes that's how it goes. Things break, we rebuild them stronger. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket, the latest check from Leslie's court-ordered payments. The money arrived like clockwork now, though I knew it was hurting her to send it. Part of me still wondered if that mattered to me. "This is yours," I said, handing it to Ricardo. "Every cent you earned." He took the envelope and tapped it against his palm, laughing softly. "You know what's funny? You rebuilt more than a car these past months." "What do you mean?" "I watched you, man. That first day when you brought in that wreck, you were wrecked too. All quiet, looking at the ground. Now look at you." He gestured at me with the envelope. "Standing tall, eyes forward. You rebuilt yourself while we rebuilt this beauty." I hadn't thought about it that way, but he wasn't wrong. Those first weeks after the incident, I could barely sleep, barely eat. Every sound made me tense. Now I moved differently, spoke differently, like someone who knew exactly what he could withstand. Ricardo helped me back the car out of the shop, the engine's rumble echoing off the walls. I shook his hand, pulled him into a quick hug, and slid behind the wheel. "Keep it shiny," he called as I drove away. The drive home felt ceremonial. I took the long way, windows down, letting the spring air rush through the cabin. People turned to look at the gleaming car as I passed. I felt nothing but calm. When I pulled into my driveway and opened the garage door, I paused. This was the same space where everything had fallen apart, where Leslie had swung that bat and shattered more than just glass and metal. For a moment, I could still hear the crack of aluminum against the door panel, still see her face twisted with rage. I took a deep breath and pulled the car inside. The space looked different now, cleaner, more organized, with new shelving and better lights. I'd rebuilt this too, piece by piece, erasing the chaos she'd left behind. That evening the doorbell rang. Molly stood on the porch with 2 bags of Chinese food and a 6-pack of beer. Her smile was wide and genuine as she stepped inside. "So it's done? The car's finished?" she asked, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "Completely restored," I said, grabbing plates from the cabinet. "Better than new." We settled at the dining table with steaming cartons of food between us. The house felt peaceful, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. "Heard anything about her?" Molly asked carefully, poking at her lo mein. I nodded. "She's renting that small place over by Westfield, working at the department store downtown. The payments are hurting her, but they come on time." "Good," Molly said firmly. Then, more gently. Not that I want her suffering, but consequences. I remembered watching Leslie's face in court when the judgment came down, the disbelief, then anger, then finally a kind of defeated acceptance. I'd felt nothing but relief. You know, Molly said, taking a sip of her beer, you didn't just win, Edison. You healed. I watched you these past months. You're you again, maybe even more you than before. I smiled faintly. She was right. The Edison from before would have shouted back, might have even broken something of Leslie's in retaliation, but I'd chosen a different path, methodical, disciplined, focused, just like rebuilding the car. After dinner, Molly helped me clear the dishes, then hugged me goodbye at the door. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Dad would be too. When she left, I walked back to the garage and flipped on the lights. The Mustang sat there, gleaming and whole. I ran my hand along the driver's door, the first panel Leslie had struck, and felt nothing but cool, perfect metal. I started the engine, listening to its steady hum fill the space. The sound was comforting, a mechanical heart beating with perfect rhythm. I let it run for a minute before switching it off. As I closed the garage door and turned off the lights, only a faint glow remained, catching the chrome trim and casting gentle reflections around the space. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. Some people break things to feel powerful. I rebuild to remember that I survived. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.